standard way to say what? Heterozygous. I don't know why I said it that way. But it's a heterozygous purple. They're not true breeding. They're purple, but they're not true breeding. So what do? We just split these two alleles, big P and little p. They're being crossed to somebody who's true breeding purple, and what's their genotype? Big P, big P. We split those, and then we just combine them together in the squares. Big P, big P, big P, big P, big P, little p, big P, little p. So what should their offspring look like? Purple. 100% purple. But it's going to be 50% true breeding purple, 50% non-true breeding purple. Okay. What about not true breeding purple crossed to true breeding white? Somebody help me out here.
Big P, little p.
Big P, little p crossed to little p, little p. Split them. Combine them together. What do we have? Two true breeding white and two non-true breeding purple. So this cross, where you take an individual with a dominant phenotype and you cross it to an individual that has the recessive phenotype, it's called a test cross, because you're testing to see, is it homozygous or heterozygous? If it were homozygous, what would you have seen? If this purple one were homozygous and you did this cross, what would you have gotten as offspring? All big P, little p's, so they would all be purple. So that's a way you can figure out, if you can't self-pollinate, and not all organisms can, what the genotype of the individual is. You can cross it back to one that has the recessive phenotype. Okay. Are you guys ready for things to get really crazy? Yeah? Good. Me too. So, Mendel is also interested to see if traits influenced each other in terms of their inheritance pattern. So meaning if you looked at two separate traits, like color and shape, for instance, did it matter whether in the first generation the color was together with a certain shape? Did it influence what came out at the end or not? And so what he did to figure out that question of do these two traits influence each other's inheritance is he established true breeding lines of peas that are both round and yellow, and true breeding lines of pea plants that are both wrinkled and green. Now, fortunately for him, for these crosses that he did, he happened to choose traits whose genes reside on separate chromosomes. So he chose shape, round versus wrinkled, and color, yellow versus green. And these are genes that occur on two totally separate chromosomes from each other. So if I draw this individual and draw their chromosomal makeup, it would look something like this. Draw it over here. This individual is round, and they're true breeding round. So what letter would we choose to designate for shape in this case? And let me back up. So take a look at the inheritance pattern for these traits. What letter would you predict we would use for color, and what letter, color of seed, and shape of seed? What letters would you predict we use? You might choose R because round is the dominant trait, and you might choose Y because yellow color is the dominant trait. So if you're true breeding round and yellow, what is your genotype for the round gene? RR, but which R? big R. So it's going to be big R, big R. And what about for shape, for color? Big Y, big Y. What about for wrinkled and green? Little r, I heard. Because wrinkled, remember, is recessive. And if you're true breeding, if you have a wrinkled P, you have to be homozygous. And if you're green, that's recessive. So if you're a green P, you also have to be homozygous. So not GG, but YY. And which Y? Little y. Does everybody see sort of the way that we do this naming scheme? So this would be little y, little y. So if you look at the chromosomes, I told you that shape and color, that is the genes for them, resided on separate chromosomes. So that means when I draw this, I would have to draw a cell that would be 2n equals 4. I'd have to draw 2 pairs of homologous chromosomes to represent all the chromosomes to contain this genotype. So if I do that, and I draw one pair of black chromosomes that have the big R's on them, and then I'll draw a separate pair that have the big Y's. And if I do the same for wrinkled and green, well, I'm diploid, so I have 2 of the black chromosomes, and they have little r's, and I have 2 blue chromosomes, and they have little y's. So you don't have to sketch out all of meiosis, but I want you to figure out if this individual, this true breeding round yellow pea, goes through meiosis, what are their gametes going to look like? And if this true breeding wrinkled and green goes through meiosis, what are their gametes going to look like? And it's actually much simpler than you think. So see if you can figure that out. You don't have to sketch meiosis out, but you might talk through it with your neighbors.